So, in the meantime, thank you very much for joining me. My name is Amanda, and today I'm going to talk to you about how Salesforce CPQ brought visibility, control, and major lessons learnt for a business. Now, before I kick in, let's have a little bit of audience participation, just to make sure you're awake and you haven't been completely pied out. So, who in this room here has actually worked in sales? Hands up? Yeah? Fabulous stuff. And who in this room has actually worked alongside sales team as well? Great. Well, you then may have some affinity to this talk this afternoon. So let me help set the scene straight away. So imagine there was a sales team, and this sales team was given a task of brand new product range to then sell. And these were subscriptions, when beforehand the actual customers were being sold a much more transactional product. They were given really tough targets. And for the rest of the business, they were kind of thinking that the sales team had a massive free rein just to sell, because of these targets that they had to get. And in fact, when it came to a handover post-sell, when it came to handing it over to the account management or to finance and reporting and order processing, it wasn't so much of a handover process. It was more of a sort of pulling of the pin and throwing it, going incoming, if you were lucky. Let me kind of explain this in a little bit more detail. So here is what the process looked like. The pink, by the way, pinkish, is a sort of a human interaction. The blue is a Salesforce thing, and the grey is another system of sorts. So it starts off with a human generating a lead. Don't let that be confused as a Salesforce lead, by the way. They would then create in Salesforce an opportunity. They would also create an event because they were targeted to do so. They did that very well, got commission. And then the person who got that event, a rep, would then go and consult this Goliath spreadsheet. And on this spreadsheet would tell them their account that they were consulting. They would also see what product that account was recommended and this magic bespoke price. They would then go and visit the client, talk it over, and the client was like, oh, that sounds quite interesting, thank you very much, yeah. They would then maybe update the opportunity with the product that was suggested on the Goliath spreadsheet, and maybe also the price as well, or maybe not, or maybe just one, maybe not the other, because within Salesforce, there was a zero price against the product because it was all calculated in this Goliath spreadsheet. And so they also may have updated the actual opportunity calls and events as well, so they might have done that too. They would then email their client the proposal, or maybe write it on a fag packet or whatever and just give it to them. And the client would eventually sort of agree to this and then accept a contract. And that contract could have been emailed, or that contract could have been slid across the desk. At which point the client would go, oh, that's lovely, but can we change this and can we change that? No problem at all. And then this would then be written in hieroglyphics on the contract and then signed. And that signed signature contract would then come back and the salesperson would win their opportunity because that's when they got their commission. But that opportunity money amount didn't necessarily correspond back to that contract. No, that could have been completely different. Or the product, by the way, that could be completely different as well. But the opportunity, once closed, would then auto-create a contract record, which would auto-create a task, which would auto-create a case as well for account management. If you were lucky, the salesperson would get that contract and take a photo of it with their phone and then attach it to the contract record. Normally, however, that photo would have been the size of about a postage stamp, so you were never going to read it again. Then, some poor soul had to then get the hieroglyphic contract, physically try and read it, and then put that into the separate order system, of which then this separate order system would then fire out to the finance system to try and invoice them. So, you can see it was a bit of an interesting process. You could almost suggest that this process was a bit of a commercial facepalm, really.
Did you lose a bet or something, or was it just
What, was this real? Yeah. This really happened for quite some time.
possibly go wrong?
you know, they made money out of this. They actually, sent out contracts. People paid this stuff, kind of. Anyway, as you can see, there was way too many touch points along the journey. There was also lots and lots of disparate systems being used as well. Process, if you could say there was a process, wasn't really being adhered to. No one really had control of what products were being sold, and the customers certainly didn't know whether what had been sold is what they should be getting or whether they were going to get that thing as well. I mean, it was pretty unreliable, and as it came to reporting, well, that was more entertainment value than anything. What the business was crying out for was visibility and control. Whilst the salespeople were happy to sell because as soon as they sold something, they were then going to get money, they didn't really mind about that. But the rest of the business, who were looking at trying to look after what happened next, desperately needed this. So instead of thinking about a human impact, they decided technology was going to be the solution. So they came to us and went, okay, fine, this is what you're going to get. We're going to improve on the current setup of what we got with Salesforce, tying that stuff up. We're going to bring in Salesforce CPQ, and we're going to integrate DocuSign. And this is how it looks. Forget about the lead thing, because that was a whole different phase and very complicated. We're going to kick off still with the opportunity in Salesforce. Then comes in CPQ, at which point you have a quote record, you have a quote line editor where you play with the products. You have a quote template where you can actually send this very pretty thing to the customer. Then you bring in DocuSign, where the email signature contract management comes in, which then goes back to this CPQ quote record, which updates that, which then updates the opportunity to close one, which then creates our contract, which is standard Salesforce, and then brings in this new object called subscription. Now, we're pretty familiar when it comes to Salesforce. We're reasonably cozy when it comes to DocuSign. But actually, for some of us, CPQ is quite new, really. Now, I have to say that there are other CPQ products out there, but I'm telling you why we chose CPQ in particular. And what I want to do is spend a few minutes just showing you what CPQ looks like. Let me just start. I got taught in Classic. We built in Classic. Classic. Okay, got that over it. From an opportunity record in Salesforce, you then get a related list. It's called a quote. And this starts your journey instead of using traditional products. And from this quote here, this record or this object is completely configurable. In fact, CPQ is very, very configurable because it is native to Salesforce. Here you can add whatever fields you want to do when it comes to wanting to sort out your own reporting, or you want to add information when it comes to this pretty template that I'm going to show you later as well, all sits here. If anyone's done the Salesforce CPQ training, by the way, you'll recognize some of these next slides because it's actually come from my developer org, which I learnt from the training. So from here, whilst you can see there's a ton of fields, and believe me, it goes on, you then, as a salesperson, as an end user, you don't have to freak out. There's not going to be too much here to worry about. You just start off with adding a couple of fields in. The first one, primary. Now, you can have as many quotes against one opportunity as you can physically muster. But if you check one primary checkbox against one quote, then all that information that's rolled on that quote about the products and the amount rolls up to the opportunity. And so you can see on the opportunity how much it's worth and what products are being sold. And that's good for your pipeline reporting. As a salesperson, I check the primary. I put in my start date. I then might put in how long it is or an end date. And then I can press save. And then I can move on to the sexy stuff, which is the next page. Now you start seeing that this looks quite lightning-esque, but it's actually Visualforce. And from here, as a salesperson, I then get to see all the products that I can select. Now, I could have done that filtering via what type of customer it was and therefore shown you the products that are relevant to that customer, or it could have been about me and what team I'm in as well. It's all very configurable. Now, here I've got a whole load of computer products that I can select, and I can see pricing and things like that, and I could do a filtering if I wanted to as well. So then I pick my product, and I move on to a point when I can now do a little bit more to it. For this particular product, I can configure further. I've chosen a Mac, and what I can now choose is the size of RAM. And that can affect what price my overall quote is going to be. Now, once I've chosen my RAM, I can then select, and I go through now to a summary page. And these are all the products that I have chosen against my particular quote. And here is the total as well of the overall quote. And I might go, oh, actually, that's a bit rich for this particular customer. I might want to maybe add some discounts if I want to. And I can either add a discount against the total quote, I can add a discounts against the product line, or I can add discounts against the family grouping of products as well. I could also add promotions here too, and if my customer turned around and said, well, actually, I've got an upper ceiling price of X amount, I can then use a target customer amount as well. I can manipulate. Also from this quotes page, I can even favorite some of the products that I like. I can remove them from this quote, I can clone them, or I can go back and configure, maybe change that size of that RAM I chose earlier. Maybe that will also help the price of the quote too. But once I'm happy with it, I can press save, and it would take me back to that original quote page we saw in Classic. And from there, I can then preview what I've put together as a template. And here's one I made earlier. Now, if you have a little bit more patience and imagination than me, you can make this look a lot prettier. You can put in logos and your company name. You can make this a lot nicer as well. You can put signatures, you can put T's and C's, and that can be dynamic as well, depending on the phase you are within your quote process. You can send this off then to the client using Salesforce CPQ standard functionality via email templates for Salesforce, and then it can use with DocuSign, spin out, and come back in again, all signed up. Really clever stuff. But I wanted to share you with those pieces. And so that is why we chose CPQ. We thought it was actually highly configurable, it was native to Salesforce, and it had good functionality, actually. So now I'm going to talk about the project delivery of that. Now, CPQ themselves turn around and ask that you choose a partner that has had the training. Now, fortunately, our tame implementation provider, Brightgen, had actually just done all that training, and they also knew our org, so it was a perfect combination. And this is how we did it. This is our Gantt chart of how we delivered the project. Now, you'll notice the fact it's a little bit waterfally. And all this world of Agile all the time, I personally think that Agile has a brilliant place, certainly when it comes to the build and the UAT phases. However, I think it's absolutely critical to know before you start what it is that you want to capture and what that solution is going to look like. You then go through a nice Agile phases. You get to a point when you finish that design of the system where you can then train people on a system that they're about to use fully and then go on through deployment. And for CPQ, we had old world to move to new world. There we had data migration. So let me take you through those phases. We started off with capturing requirements. Now, this is at the first point when the project started to slip. And you know things are not going to go well. When, at the time, you're talking to one group of people who are going, we kind of do it like this. I think we do it like this. Yeah, we do like that. Yeah, we definitely do it like this. Okay, great. Then we go and talk to the next group of people going, no, we don't do it like that. No, we do it like this. You're like, oh, God. So actually, the whole requirement process became extended, and it was really complex as well because of all these nuances that went on within this one department. However, we did clarify the fact that the objectives were visibility and control, and we did also define success factors as well, getting control of the sales process, detailed reporting, and also improved adoption. And at the end of this extended requirements process, we did a big playback session to a lot of key stakeholders in the room, of which point they sort of went, oh, yeah, it's fine, great, and then signed off, which meant we could then move forward. And this is what the new process was going to look like. Now, remember, pink was human, blue was Salesforce, and then grey was a different system. Now, lead was going to be in a different phase. Forget about that. Lead was created. It went back into the opportunity, it created the event, and then The person would then create a CPQ quote, and they would then manipulate the quote if they wanted to by adding products. They could have put together a beautiful presentation if they wanted to, but then they would go and visit the client, talk through those options. They might update that quote again, depending on what came back from the client, and then they would update the call and the event logs. And then, instead of sending out an email, they would then use CPQ quote proposal document to send out. And if the customer liked it, would then use that same functionality to then send out that contract via DocuSign. DocuSign brought out away from all the pain of the hieroglyphics, and then would bring that signed contract from the customer back in, which then would update the quote records to accepted, which would close when the opportunity, and then the contract would then be auto-created with the information, no longer a photograph attached. Along came the task and a case, and this new subscriptions record, which now held all the really new interesting information about the product that they have purchased, with start and end dates and values and things. We still had separate systems, this separate system process to place the order and then for the invoicing. Couldn't change that, unfortunately. Which moved us on to the actual build phase. And for the build phase, we then had a division of tasks. Because we had our existing world of opportunity and contracts and tasks and cases and loads of process builder behind that, which our internal sales team then actually worked on. And then while Brightgen worked on CPQ and the DocuSign integration. During that time, we had plenty of show and tell sessions, making sure that people felt okay what was going on as much as we could. And we had regular governance meetings as well to say for checking on decisions or any other problems that were kicking in. Now, it was during some of these governance meetings that we started talking about UAT. And UAT was coming up in the schedule, at which point the stakeholders turned around and went, well, that's not going to suit us that date. We need to keep the team selling, therefore we cannot start using UAT, doing UAT when you said so. Great, thanks. That was at the beginning, now you tell us. Never mind. But we didn't waste that time. In fact, the internal sales team actually did, the internal Salesforce team actually did pre-UAT. So we got through a load of stuff before our users actually got to see it. We then did UAT, unfortunately, because those people had been engaged in selling, they then wanted a holiday. So they didn't turn up. So we had another UAT, at which point we did get them to turn up because we also dragged them out of their normal environment, put them in a dedicated space, and got them to do the job. At the end of it, we captured over 100 bugs, but most of those weren't bugs, they were actually process changes or product changes, because again, the business continuously going, this isn't right, we don't normally do this, we don't normally do that. However, finally, after the extended process, we did get sign-off from our stakeholders, which meant that we could then move on to training. Oh, guess what? So training time that was scheduled in right at the beginning also didn't work for the sales team. In fact, it was pushed back by a month because they turned around and said, actually, we want to sell. Okay, good, thanks. Which meant everything got delayed again. We had internal training about the admin side of CPQ, so that was valuable. And then eventually we got to do delivery of the sales teams. And we did over 60 people in a 9 consecutive day window. It was quite tiring for myself to do that. We did it off-site, but also in a dedicated training venue as well. But hey, we got through it, and it was a bit of a team effort as well to do these things too. But we got to the point when we could then deploy. As a PM, you have to think about lots of things when it comes to projects, but admittedly, I didn't think of this one. So when it came to deployment, throughout the whole of the project, we were like sort of sideswiped left, right, and centre with other stuff. We also were given 3 other projects to deliver, all within the same time zone. They must be delivered by this set point date, new financial year must happen. Great, thanks. It meant that my team were very, very lean. I was literally going, right, you look after that one, you look after that one. Okay, go, scatter, we can do this. And then, on the eve of the window that we were going to deploy, a major office flood occurred, and it took out the whole building. We had to move offices like that. Now, my team didn't just look after Salesforce, they looked after all the systems for the business. And so suddenly, we are now having to keep the business operational, as well as do a deployment. And so half of the team, myself included, were then rushed off into this new office in order to get things going and keep the business go live. I even turned into receptionist whilst for the phones to get up. That was novel. Missed opportunity there. But we made it. We made it happen. And we also deployed in this tiny window of opportunity. There is something for saying being in the cloud. So once we actually deployed, we could then look about data migration. And during the project, we actually had on board an analyst who looked through the old world scenario of the opportunities and contracts that we'd already got. And strangely enough, mainly because of that lack of process beforehand, a lot of that stuff was very unique. It meant that actually, to manipulate it into a new world, we came to the decision actually it had to be manually done because you just couldn't lift it and shift it. There was also a whole ton of subscriptions that were never put into the system for interesting business reasons, but they could have been uploaded in safely. And there's a lot of data migration tips actually from Salesforce CPQ. So that's on the how we did it. I now want to share with you lessons learned. You know that phrase, the elephant in the room? I want you to meet my troop. And I'm going to talk about these four in particular. Plan, people, process, products. So let's start with plan. So, in the big scheme of things, I personally think that the scope for the project was too restrictive. Because, you remember there were those two systems at the end that we weren't allowed to touch? I honestly think that we should have done that. We should have invoiced straight from Salesforce so we didn't have to put it into the old order system, because a lot of the stuff of the old order system world we dragged through as legacy pain. Unnecessarily, we should have been bolder on that. Really should have been bolder. This was the opportunity to move forward and make good change. Didn't happen. Also, the project scope didn't account for those other stakeholders. I said there was an account management team. These guys responded to the cases and the tasks that we created. And we brought that and lifted and shifted that from older process to new process as well, mainly because those people didn't have the time and the capacity to even think about, are we doing this right? Could we do this better? I think this project definitely needed more time, better planning of what really do you want to influence here. When we delivered the playback to the business, the timeline wasn't challenged to them. They just went, yeah, that's fine. No, we're sitting in a room, we're just hearing it all back. No, it's absolutely fine. But the timeline for UAT and the timeline for training was listed there right at the beginning, before we even started capturing requirements or doing the build. Yet no one said anything till it was literally on the eve of doing this next phase that they turned around and went, oh no, that doesn't work for us. So again, they could have had foresight moving forward. But also, this timeline for this project and the 3 other projects that came skipping along was fixed. We absolutely had to be live by this new financial year, irrespective of the quality of the product that we were going to deliver. And of course, not only that, we had the 3 others as well, just for fun. But on good news, we did actually deliver. We went live by the new financial year. Then comes the second one, people. Now, because of that scope creep massively and restriction and timeline factor as well, the CPQ wasn't prioritized. In fact, I was told CPQ is absolutely a priority. Yeah, but what about those ones? No, they're absolutely a priority as well. But which one is the priority? No, they're all priorities. You don't quite understand the priority thing, do you? Okay, no. Just you know, what does priority mean? It meant that we had real lack of resources in order to try and deliver this as well. It was really tough, and we were literally being split. You know, okay, you go over there, you go over there, cover it. But not just for the tech team that we struggled, but it was also the stakeholders too. They were in exactly the same boat because they too were affected by these other projects as well. They needed to be here. They also had a job to do. How do you focus? How do you actually try and do that? They had lack of empowerment and engagement because of it, because they didn't know where to turn their heads. They didn't know that they needed to be trying to do their job or one or the other projects. And don't forget, this was a technological change, not a human change one. There was no business change owner here. No one thought about the human. But we did get commitment from the actual solution as well, and we had a small decision committee in order to keep moving things forward quickly. And everyone did engage and embrace CPQ, and we certainly had strong collaboration with our Brightgen team. Process. As I said earlier, with the capturing of requirements, there was some amount of fluidity when it came to that and processes, mainly because as a business they hadn't actually thought about what they do every day. They just did stuff. And when it came to try nailing them down, they wouldn't commit to that. And maybe because that was that lack of empowerment back earlier as a people, as a whole department, they weren't strong enough to go, we do it like this. It meant that we actually ended up with very complex processes. We've got people desperately trying to capture as much control as possible and as much visibility as possible. So that quote page had a ton of validation. Oh, you can't go past this. Oh, you can't press save there. Oh, you can't do this. Go back to make that happen. It was a bit painful, you know, which meant that the adoption of CPQ was slower. People still wanted to go back and hug that Goliath spreadsheet instead of giving CPQ a go, walking through the pages of the process to find out what that price was at the end. They wanted to know what the price was at the beginning. That wasn't the point. It was to build up a story and find out and make it work. But fortunately, we did actually define a process for the standard product range, and we met the goals. Now, when I talk about the standard product range, during the process of our project, not only did we sell to individual customers, we also sold to groups of customers. And this whole thing of selling to groups morphed over time. It also meant that what we thought at the beginning was not true for them at the end. And in fact, they didn't want visibility and control. Well, they wanted a little bit of visibility, but certainly not control. They wanted it to be bespoke. And so really, for groups, CPQ didn't work for them. Products. Prior to the beginning of the project, I gave the business a homework task. This is your opportunity to go through all of the products you currently sell, these subscriptions, and really think about them. Really think about, do you need to move forward with this? Can we strip anything out? This is the time for spring cleaning. And they turned around to me and said, no problem, no, we've only got four subscriptions, that's all we have, no problem. And I went, okay, fine, good. This is where the point of not understanding, lack of knowledge of their own product set, and also terminology played the part here, because the own business users did not really understand what their products were or how they talked about them. And in reality, those 4 subscriptions actually were 37. And these subscriptions are products made of products. So when we came to uploading this, it wasn't just 37 products, it was 1,000 lines of data. Thanks, guys. Not only that, the pricing for these subscriptions were really, really complex. It pulled an awful lot from the account. What type of account are you? Where are you? How big are you? Is it a Tuesday? I don't know. Is it a full moon? Lots of different things that factored into this that they could think about, which then made it really challenging to build. Now, I suppose one thing I do want to talk about is actually CPQ itself does have limitations. We accept that. We accept the fact that we, live in a tenanted world and we have governor limits. We have to go through that. And same with CPQ. As a managed package, it's pretty flexible, but you have to respect it. And it got to the point that I learnt along the journey that you can manage about 500 lines in a quote. I mean, that sounds pretty big. If you were a customer with a proposal and you got 500 lines of products. But believe me, when it came to that quote, the group side of things, actually, we were wanting to give the visibility. And if you're buying as a big deal, you might get to 500 lines or more. But actually, CPQ bombs out at 500 lines. So that's something I wanted to share. But they didn't tell us that at the beginning. In fact, they told us it in a kind of cryptic way, which wasn't very human. So now you know. I suppose good news-wise, we did identify what the products were, and we could actually upload it instead of having to type them in manually by using a CSV and an external ID. So that was a benefit. So there are your 4 elephants. However, I want to tell you about another one. This elephant is not in the room. In fact, this elephant is sitting outside in the cold because it's not really loved. This is the 5th elephant. And anyone gets a reference to any Luc Besson, 5th element, 5th element? Yes. I've been living with that for a long time. That was my personal joke, had to be there. Anyway, this one's called Punter because I'm keeping with my P theme. And Punter means the customer. The customer was not considered. And I think really, if you're using these sort of systems like Salesforce, you should be putting your customer first. What is it that we are trying to do with our customer? What would our customer want? What does our customer think? Does our customer like these products? Does our customer need 37 different subscriptions? Maybe not. But maybe if you thought about that, you would have done something different with this project in the whole place. Now, I've got another one to give to you. Because this 6th elephant impacts all the other ones. And keeping with my P theme, and also thinking about my drinks industry background, this one is called the publican. And the publican represents leadership or the exec team or C-suite or however you want to reference them. It's this lot that affected all the other elephants. It might have been only small, but it really did. And effectively, these people did not have an overall strategy for the business. Literally, they could change their minds on a weekly basis. They also had no cohesiveness, no collaboration. They were given different tasks to do. Therefore, they were charged by going over here and going over there. You've got a salesperson who is charged to try and sell as much as they can, whereas you've got somebody else going, let's have visibility, let's have control. They conflicted. Therefore, how do you deliver when you do not have a cohesive story from the top? The CPQ project wasn't a priority, but it was a priority, but it had 3 other priorities. What is a priority? Again, what is a business priority? And therefore, because of that, I didn't have really a supportive executive sponsor, and they weren't particularly bothered about governance meetings either. It was hard work. So here are my 6 elephants.
Procession.
Indeed, I almost did a dance then. You're probably starting to wonder that this particular project was a bit of a disaster. It was challenging, I will give you that. Very, very challenging. But you know what? In spite of these, we delivered a project on time, in budget. It met the objectives of visibility and control. It is used by the business and actually adopted by them. And we did it even with biblical office floods and a lot of challenge going on. And I think that should be celebrated. So thank you. Any questions? Laura?
How expensive was your counselling becoming
Therapy. Yeah, that's a continuous thing, yes. Yeah. That's fine. John.
No, is the quote object the same as the standard Salesforce quote object?
No, it is a custom object.
So does this one actually deal with that?
there is a billing side of things which you can buy in as a separate piece with Salesforce CPQ, which you probably could then fit in with that, because VAT is a complex beast.
Yeah.
And there's tons of different VATs as well. So, yeah, go see a grown-up about that one.
Okay.
Does the CPQ quote object allow you to track cost as well as sales price and calculate profit margins? Because the opportunity to just have one value,
Yes.
which for people who buy and sell things is totally useless.
You could put that in because that is completely configurable. So if you then put against your products the cost of value of that, you could then drag that through onto the quote, absolutely, and then do some formula calculations if you wanted to. So, yes. No? Good. Thank you very much. Cheers.